All right. Welcome to ArtSpeak University. Today, we are bringing in the experts to talk to all us mere mortals about sermon series design. I'm going to toss it to them and let them take it away.
Awesome. Well, the point is that we're all mere mortals and that this is something we can all do and learn from, hopefully. Us teaching this, me, Jared, Mike, Bria, we are mere mortals for sure. So I'm going to maybe share my screen here. Is it related to Hocus Pocus 2 coming out? Probably. Yeah, that's an Easter egg. And then let me see here. Let's do full screen. Full screen mode. Maybe. All right. Can we see that? Everybody good? All right. Sermon series designed for mere mortals. We want to just talk through how do we produce effective and engaging, intriguing sermon series graphics and take it beyond just a slide with the title. How do we do this right? And this is a very overview kind of thing that we're going to talk about. We're not going to get into real specific things like here's use Photoshop like this or do that or do these sizes. We're going to keep it real far out, keep it big, and talk about it's kind of more so the creative process as it pertains to sermon series design. So real quick, how do I go to next? I just tried to, let's see. There we go. Oh, hold on, everybody. There, no. I got a spinning wheel. Okay, there we go. All right, here we go. Sermon series design. So ideally, what we're wanting out of this is that the design, the thing we make is going to communicate a concept. It's going to set a tone. It's going to present the information that's needed to communicate. So that's kind of like, if we're going to boil all of this down into those three things, that's what we want to be sure we're accomplishing at the end of the project. When it's said and done, we deliver it and we put it up on that screen or use it to share on social. That's what we want to see happening. And then obviously, of course, because of the world we're in, we want it to communicate the gospel, honor the Lord and proclaim, his goodness too. So, I mean, that's kind of maybe assumed here. This is we're talking about the creative process too, though. So, we just click, guys. That's what we do. All right. So 3 steps, and there's 3 of us teaching today, or sharing, or whatever. And we're just going to kind of take one of these steps and talk through them, and share what we have here. So first step in the process is discovery and understanding. That's going to be Bria. She's going to walk us through that in just a second. And then I'll take us through expansion and contraction. How do we do that? What does that look like? What does that mean? And then, Mike is first. Mike is discovery. And then I'm expansion. And then Bria is polishing and finishing. She's gonna get onto me for that later. All right. And because I'm like, I have the slides, they're gonna have to be like next slide. So like, it's gonna be fun. Okay, here we go. Take it away, Bria.
You mean take it away, Mike?
I did it again. I don't know. Maybe I thought
you did it. You did it again. No, it's fine.
Go,
it's
Mike.
Fine. I'm Michael, Mike, whatever you want to call me. I'm one of the art directors with ArtSpeak. And to quote a really great man, life finds a way. And we're going to help you find your way through working through these sermon graphics by starting with the first step in the process, and by far my favorite step in the process, and that's discovery and understanding. I'm more of a people person than a pixels person. So this is my point. This is my this is my favorite part of the process, because this is where I get to ask a lot of great questions. I've learned a lot of great questions from guys like Corey and Ryan and some of our fantastic writers on our team. And this is really my favorite part, where I'm just going to get to know the client, get to know the details of the project, and learn as much as humanly possible about what we're working on. Next slide, Jared. And the way we do that is we start with a brief, and this will come in either through the portal, through a conversation with the client. So essentially, this is the part of the process where we get all of the essential information, name of the sermon series, dates, times, locations, scripture references, etc. This is one of the most important documents in the process, because this will set up what we're going to be doing next, and that's asking clarifying questions. Next slide, Jared. So this is probably hands down the most important part, or one of the most important parts of the process, is asking those clarifying questions, getting clarity to not only fill the gaps, but also continue the conversation with our client to figure out the heart and soul of what we're going to be working on with them. And through this process, we're asking things like, what does this need to feel, or what do people need to feel when they're engaging with this series, when they're watching this on the live stream, when they're engaging with this sermon series in person. So we're asking questions like that to kind of get to know the client. And sometimes, and this came up in conversation when we were prepping for this yesterday, sometimes you already know that client, so you kind of know what direction they're going to be leaning into. But for people who have never worked with a particular client on a project, this is going to be the most important thing for you guys to keep in mind as well, is if there's anything at all you don't either understand about a client, either understand about the project, or if you just have general questions about look and feel, you can always go to your AD, the art director on the project. But I would also encourage you guys to go to the brand guide and the style overview, because that's kind of going to give you an idea of what their look and feel is going to be. Next slide, Jared. And one of the most important questions you need to ask yourself during this part of the process is, do I need any more information, or does the information I have provide enough inspiration and direction to move on? And this is probably the part that I kind of struggle with a little bit, is because sometimes a client will come in with a brief or come in with a project description that's a little bit more nebulous. We're getting ready to head into the Christmas season, and I've often said that I really don't like designing for Christmas, is because Christmas is Christmas. It just needs to feel like Christmas. And sometimes you get those projects that are a little bit more straightforward, but sometimes you get something a little bit more abstract, which is part of something we're going to be talking about later on in this presentation, that you have to dig a little bit deeper in discovery to understand. Again, ask yourself, do I have enough inspiration? Do I have enough direction to actually start designing the thing that I'm supposed to be designing for? So the next step in the process, after you have all that information, you've asked all the clarifying questions, you have an idea of what you're working with or what you're working on, then that's when you start tinkering with ideas, expanding and contraction. And so that's where I'm going to hand it off to Jared, and he's going to talk a little bit about, going to expand a little bit more in that part of the process.
Yeah. So I don't have to tell myself next slide, which is cool. Step 2 in the overall process, expansion and contraction. We kind of summarize that with this sentence here: exploring enough ideas, promoting creativity so we can find good solutions. So the whole point here is we want to, now that we have that essential info, that brief, where we know, we've just kind of discovered everything, we have clarity, we feel like we understand what we're getting at, what we're trying to communicate, what's the tone, what's all the information. Now we can take all of that and start throwing stuff at the wall. We're gonna expand. We're gonna think of layouts. We're gonna think of fonts and colors and textures and images, all kinds of things. We're just going to start expanding on this. Okay, we can ask lots of what if questions, or how could we sorts of questions, things where we're just going to let the creativity go crazy. And we have here ideate. It's like in real estate, location. That's like the essential thing. Like with this part of the process, you want to just have one idea, just change it a little bit, vary it a little bit, see, okay, I like that, what if we did this, or whatever. And you're just going to start getting this stuff out, whether it's notebook or on an artboard, or even if maybe it's a collaborative kind of creative meeting and you're doing it with a couple people, you want this expansion. There's kind of there at the bottom, keep bad ideas. There's really not like a bad idea at this step. Anything's on the table. We want to see, this could maybe not be the right idea, but maybe it's going to lead us down the road to a better idea if we ideate on it, or if we just sit with it for a bit and we let it kind of stew and explore it. So the whole point here is we just want to get a view for what's possible, what could work here, what's in line with the brief, what's in line with the client, like Mike said, and something that's really important is you know your client, and you want to know their audience as well. You want to kind of empathize with what they're doing as the client, and then also with the audience and what they need, and all those sorts of things will influence kind of this step. So once we expand and we've done all of that, then we have to go through the necessary steps. So we're going to contract, and so that's the next part here is, now that we threw everything at the wall, we want to take a look at the wall and see what's sticking or what's fallen off. All right, that for sure is not going to work, or this looks really good. Let's keep that, or let's explore that more. And so we're going to start to narrow down the creativity that we've done, and we're going to see, you know what, this font, I like it, but maybe those serifs are too aggressive. This one feels better. This feels more in line with the tone that we want for this series. Or, this image has these colors in it, and that's really great. I think we start heading that direction with those colors. And sometimes we might call this the messy middle, where you expanded and you have this playing field that's just full of stuff, and it's messy. And now you're going to start to narrow it down. And then when you start to do that, you kind of get overwhelmed and it feels really messy. And you're like, oh, I don't know. I have to start making all these decisions. I don't know what to do. So that's another part here. Use your resources and take advantage of feedback. So hopefully, with ArtSpeak, we have a great team. We have a great feedback circle. We have a feedback channel. You have your team that you're working with. Maybe it's the AD or, somebody else that knows the client really well. You can, show them your your expansion and say, what stands out to you, or what do you think here? Like, I was thinking this, do you have any thoughts there? And some of that is probably part of the expansion phase where you're going to collaborate. But when you start to contract, it's really helpful to have feedback. Like, how's this feeling? Am I headed the right direction? And then again, use your resources. Your team and your feedback loop can be resources, but also things like, pull photos or stock images or vectors. Things are going to help you speed that contraction process along too. You're like, oh, we know we need a guitar shape for this. Oh, I'm going to search, let's see, what's the light stock or whatever for guitar or something. And you're going to be able to find things, get things done quicker as you go. Uriah said allowing others into the messy middle is hugely valuable. If you let people come into that, and we'll get to that here in a little while. It might be the next slide, but be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay if things aren't perfect or they're messy, or you might have to explain. You have to let some people into your thought process, and that's good. That's kind of a collaborative, creative environment. So a few pro tips in this. For both expansion and contraction. Inspiration can be anywhere. Some people will take a walk, or I know for me, like I'll think I've got these like concept graphics I'm supposed to create, and they're sitting on my head for a few days, and I'll take the kids to the park, and I'll like look across the park and I'll see something and be like, oh, that's great. So there's inspiration can be coming from anywhere. You can anchor in the most obvious idea. So, but Mike was talking about Christmas, obvious idea for Christmas. We got red, we got green, we've got like snowflakes or something like that. Depending on the context, maybe Santa or whatever, Christmas trees, all kinds of things. So there's obvious ideas, but then kind of back to his example. Also, sometimes maybe the request is more abstract. And so you don't want to stay in the obvious idea. You want to go past that. You kind of get that low hanging fruit, the easy stuff, keep going, and you go into the more abstract things, or things where you have to ideate a bit more. And so that's the next point. Try something crazy, like go off the wall. What if Christmas was neon orange and black this year? You're like, what, Halloween? No. But maybe just try something, see what happens, try it out. Just that can promote creativity. You get things out there that you didn't really ever think of before. And then again, be vulnerable. Be willing to, I need to do this more. You know, it's easy to not be vulnerable. You're like, oh, I got to deliver this perfect thing. Maybe, you know, I don't want them to think of me as somebody that's not good at this or like doesn't know what I'm doing, but it's a team. We're all in this together. Somebody said in chat something unrelated, but it applies here. It's you and me versus the problem versus kind of what we're trying to accomplish here. And we can do this together. It's not about me being perfect or me, you know, whatever. So, and then Kirk is rehashing one of our core values here: confident, humility. We want to have that, you know, we want to be humble enough that we're willing to be vulnerable, but we can also be confident in what we do and what we know and how we can go about it together. And then imperfect excellence too. These core values, it's like they work, you know, they apply. It's awesome. And then with that, at the end of that process, or when you're getting to the end, here's a helpful question you can ask yourself: does this idea, this thing I've created, expanded, contracted, whatever I write at, does this idea successfully communicate the concept and set the right tone? And if it's doing those things, then you're probably in a good ballpark. You're probably at a point where you can get to this next step, which is kind of polishing and finishing and refining that. And now we're going to go to Bria.
Okay. Yeah. So this step is polishing and refining. So really this step is really just like carrying that project across the finish line and getting ready to deliver to the client. Next slide. And I think you can, I think this can look different when it comes to designer. Like this process can vary. But one thing that, you know, as Mike and Jarek and I were talking about, like we were trying to figure out what steps should we take, like to making sure like the graphic is ready to ship to the client or ship to our feedback channel. Because sometimes you can't really just say, oh, as long as it like feels right, it's ready to go. But I think like as designers, we have like this mental checklist in our head that we're going through as we're completing a graphic. So just making sure your layers and your files are cleaned up. In most cases, we send our build files to the client, and also other designers on our team work through our files as well, because a concept may have like supporting deliverables that need to be made. So making sure things are properly named. If you have different shapes within your graphic, making sure like each element is properly like labeled, like this star is yellow star. I might have like star yellow to the left or something like that. And then also making sure things are legible, aligned right, making sure your spelling is correct, and just making sure things are like correctly positioned. I think when it comes to concept graphics, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but just looking at what is being presented, what should be read first. So that's the heading. So then it's the tagline, and then it's any other secondary elements like the series dates, a verse. So just making sure that the copy on the graphic is not competing with any other elements. And then also just remembering the elements and principle of art. Next slide. I don't know why that sounds aggressive. Sorry, Jared. But when I look at the principle of art, and I might nerd out right here, but I kind of like making sure things are ready to be shipped. I kind of look at making sure like the colors that I choose are working well, spacing is working well, the texture that I am grabbing in that expansion project like works well with what the brief is stating. So sometimes like a client may say like, oh, I want this mood to feel like vibrant, happy, lighthearted. And like in that expansion process for me, like I bring in a whole bunch of elements depending on the concept. And sometimes like this is really the phase where you're just like throwing away things and like and cleaning things up. So I look at colors and I try to bring in colors that are going to work well with that vibrancy, with that lighthearted. So next slide, Jared.
I just want to say real quick that we lifted these. These are Alex. This is
Oh
Alex
yeah.
D's. This is D's work. So he did these in a different presentation a while ago, and we lifted it. We don't want to represent it as ours, but it was relevant here. It was Bria calling it out that we could use it. So thank you, Deets.
Yes, thank you. And then I also think it's important that we'll actually go to the next slide, because really all this, while you're like looking at these elements, you're really revisiting the request and the brief of the project, like making sure the overall mood is there. So then when you do go back to like your mental checklist, you're like, okay, there's balance, there's harmony, nothing is competing. And then you're just like really checking for those details to make sure like there's, depending on the brief, like making sure there's movement. And then also, like we mentioned before, like going back to like internal feedback, because that's when like other ideas can form. There have been times where I'm just like, okay, this is solid. Let me post for feedback and see what the team thinks. And then Jared or someone's like, hey, I have this action you can use in Photoshop that like makes this texture and it'll like elevate your graphic. So then I'll be like, okay, awesome. And then I'll use it and be like, oh, this is crazy. It did elevate. So it's always good to go back to feedback to just like, again, help with that finishing and refining stage. So next slide. And then finally, you can like kind of begin to ask yourself, like, is there anything that can be added or taken away from this that would make it more successful? So if you're like going through this process and you feel like you're kind of nitpicking at your own work and tinkering with it, like, and you feel like you can take away a texture, like sometimes like going back to the brief, it will say like, it'll have a section in the brief, like avoid a feeling of moodiness, or we don't want this to feel somber or grungy. So then maybe I will have a texture within that graphic that is leaning too much on that moody side. So then I'll get rid of it. And then sometimes that's just like the perfect step to take. So next slide. So this is a project that came through and the client was wanting, they were doing a series called Speed Kills. And it was one of those projects where it was like, it wasn't a lot of information. They had given us the title, tagline, and the key verse, and like steps or elements that they knew they wanted on the concept, like their URL and logo. And so we read through this brief, and then you can go to the next slide, Jared. And then like Mike said, we go through like the discovery phase, where we send the client a mood board based off of that brief. Oh yeah, the brief also said that they wanted to lean more on the car example, like fast paced, like make it feel dynamic. So then we sent a mood board with like images that kind of reflected that that vibe. And then the client also sent us a really rough sketch of what they are looking for, because I don't know if you can see it in this example, but they were going for like, they end up liking this Gatorade campaign where it had all this vibrant colors, dynamic shapes, and just like a lot of movements. And in the bottom right corner is Jared's process. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about behind that, Jared.
Yeah, the mood. Bria was 80 on this, and the mood board she put together, the feedback she got from the client, and the direction they gave was really helpful in helping us. You know, there was kind of some expansion and all that, but then getting to this step, there was a lot of good inspiration. And then I think the thing I just wanted to say about this is that messy idea of like your artboards can be just crazy. Like as long as you're kind of, eventually you're going to contract, but first you have to ideate. So you can, you see a little bit here. I was just kind of exploring, how do I make these letters look a certain way, and just kind of, all right, do it one way, copy paste it over. All right, do that a little bit more, copy paste it over, or change it a little bit. And so it's kind of that just iteration and the ideation kinds of stuff. But yeah.
Next slide. So then Beej actually helped out with this concept as well. So Beej and Jarrett, they came out with these two awesome designs that we sent to the client. And the client really liked both of them, and were like, can we marry the two concepts, because they like little elements from each. So then you can go to the next slide. So then this is the final piece. So we kind of merged the two designs together. And then out of it came title slides, social media posts, websites, banners, and everything. And I think an invite card, and they have a movie theater that they rent out. So it was in we had poster designs as well. So this is the final look out of all of that, all of those steps. And then you can go to the next slide. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think we have one more after this. I was just going to say
Okay.
too, though, with we haven't really gotten into specifics, but this illustrates a really good example of when you do sermon graphics these days, like it has to fit in lots of different applications. So letting it have kind of elements, it has a color palette, it has maybe some fonts you're using. It's like a tiny branding experience. So you can see here, like across all of these, it feels cohesive, but it's not exactly the same graphic or exactly the same each time. So that can help a kind of overall series design feel a lot, it's elevated. It's a lot more practical and useful in that way too. But yeah. And let's see there. Do I do this? Do you want me to do this?
Sure.
This is just, we're almost out of time here, but in the last couple of minutes, we just wanted to hear, any feedback from any of this, anything that anybody stood out to anyone, or, what's your process? Does it look like this? Does it look different? Kind of what's the thoughts there? If anyone had anything to throw out.
Awesome stuff, guys. Thank you for sharing. It's always good to hear a refresher on the process. And I think the emphasis for me is the process, to allow the process to have to guide you in creating things. Because when you just try and go from nothing to the greatest thing you've ever created, it's a formula for frustration. And just to let the process go through the steps it needs to. So yeah, really, really cool to hear all this stuff and see what you guys are making.
Thanks. Yeah. And there's an analogy that works really well, is that the process is kind of the road, and then the brief and all those things are kind of the guardrails. They're going to help direct you as you go too. So yeah, thanks, Ryan. Cool. Well, I don't know how to wrap this up. That was it. That was sermon series designed for mere mortals. We're all mere mortals. Hopefully this helps all of us. Thanks, guys.